Jamming with History, Chapter 3, Beyond the First Impression. Roman had trouble focusing on anything the rest of the day. That evening he found himself lying on his bed. He kept glancing at a new name in his contacts and thinking about what to do. Should he take Virgil up on his offer to give him a ride? Was that his next move? To show that he believed that Virgil had good intentions? What did Virgil even drive? Suddenly he wondered if he had made the wrong assumptions about Virgil. How did Virgil see him? He tossed his phone into his pillows and got off his king-sized four-poster bed. He studied his image in his full-length mirror. The white button-up shirt, the red suspenders, a bow tie, the beige knee-length pants, the unflattering glasses, the yellow socks. He looked like a textbook nerd. There was no way around it. He looked around his room, which was about 400 square feet, and decorated in Disney merch, signed Broadway posters, and state-of-the-art technology. Spoiled nerd. That was probably what his classmates thought of him. And clearly Virgil had expected him to be a spineless coward, who'd do anything to avoid another tournament. He didn't know how to show that he wasn't. He didn't know why he wanted to. Maybe to even the score. He was feeling bad for assuming he knew what Virgil was like. And he'd even assumed things about what his family was like. And he'd been so wrong. So maybe it was a pride thing. If Virgil had him wrong too, then they were even and he didn't have to feel bad or stupid. Roman nodded to himself. He picked up his phone, sent Virgil a text and sat himself at his desk. He pulled a list out of his backpack and took a blank piece of paper from his notebook. He considered each of Virgil's suggestions carefully and tried to find arguments in favor and against each of them. He was going to give this project his all. He would keep his head tall and show Virgil that he was made of tougher stuff than he thought. "Roman dear, good news! I'll be able to drop you off at school tomorrow." His mother's announcement during dinner took Roman off guard. "Mother, that is very kind, but I'm fine taking my bike," he assured her. "It is no trouble, honey. You shouldn't exert yourself every morning like that anyway," she argued. Roman knew there was no way that there wasn't some kind of catch. "It's not even that far. I cut through the park and I'm there in 20 minutes. Besides, I wouldn't want you to worry about picking me up," he pointed out. None of his parents' cars were the kind that could accommodate his bike. "Nonsense! If I don't make it, I'm sure you can have one of your friends give you a ride." Oh, he saw where this was going. "I have to meet a classmate for a project. I told you this. All my friends will be home by the time I'm done," he pointed out. "Oh, well, perhaps your classmate can maybe give you a ride? Or you can walk, if it's truly not that far. You know, if you just let us buy you a decent car, then we wouldn't have to have this conversation, sweetie." There it was, the car thing again. He'd explained all his reasons for not wanting a car countless times before, not including the one where he didn't want his parents to hold it over his head. "Yes, mother," he sighed. During lunch the next day, Roman sat with his fellow theater kids. They had theater before lunch and extra rehearsals on Mondays and Fridays. Normally, they'd talk about rehearsal or study their script together, but now... And then she apologized. Like, not just for running into me, but for being rude in the past. Like, she really seemed to feel bad about it, Joe exclaimed from their spot on the picnic table. They had encountered one of the skaters earlier that day, Jane, a girl who'd given all of them grief in the past. She didn't go out of her way to bother them, but they all tried to avoid getting in her way just in case. "Man! Roman, please tell me you didn't negotiate with the Skater King," Xander pleaded. Roman shook his head. "I didn't get a chance. He had to get to swim practice. We barely had time to exchange numbers and ideas." He didn't mention Virgil's reassurance. It felt personal. "Well, if he tries something, don't worry about us, okay?" he insisted, supported by a firm nod from the others. Roman frowned a little. "I'm pretty sure it won't come to that. Virgil seems like a good guy. I mean, he's never been rude to me. How about you guys?" A silence fell over the group. "Well, I suppose I think he's been rather friendly every time we did happen to cross paths, Zainab offered. See? Maybe him standing up for me yesterday made them realize they were kind of rude to us in the past, and they decided to be nicer. I mean, Joe, you said Jane seemed genuine in her apology, right? Joe nodded. Yeah, I mean, it didn't feel like they were forcing themselves to do it. Like when the teacher tells a bully to say sorry and shake hands, they admitted. Exactly. So, I don't know. I want to try and give Virgil the benefit of the doubt here. I'm meeting him again tonight, so we'll see. It was Xander who ended up giving Roman a ride to the youth house. What is it even like in there? He wondered. Pretty cool, actually. Virgil's brother works here. He's a really nice guy. We should hang out here as a group sometimes. Roman answered a little absent-mindedly as he read through at J.L. Hawkins' latest reply. They were still stuck on the Hercules debate, going through everything from Disney using the Roman spelling rather than the Greek one, to the rearranged timeline of the myth and Megaro's true fate. At this point in their discussion, the Disney movie wasn't even brought up for several back and forths. They had been discussing the ins and outs of the myth. Roman tried to argue that Megara was Heracles' true love. That was why any relationships he had after Hera messed him up failed miserably. Hawkins, on their part, made the admittedly interesting argument that Heracles was dissociating and acting like his actions had no consequences, because he was still in denial about what happened to his first wife and 2 sons. But in their most recent reblog, Hawkins had more or less concluded that they agreed on the topic, they just worded it differently, gone back to the movie and brought up the topic of Hades. With a smirk, Roman replied, "Massive queer energy, prove me wrong." He had no clue why it had taken them this long to start this topic. Most early Disney films had that same energy. Ursula's even based on a drag queen. Maybe he was a little worried to discover that his online friend was a homophobe. By the gods, he really hoped they weren't. Then again, Roman had posted pride stuff in the past, so they probably were okay with the queer community. If not, they would have said something for sure. Well, here we are. Do you think I could check my mail for a second there? Roman smirked at Xander. You just want to check the place out, don't you? Xander just shrugged and followed him inside. Roman, hi! Grinned in greeting. Virgil is upstairs. And who is this? Xander took a step back, clearly surprised by Thomas's energy. Thomas, this is Xander, a friend of mine from theater. Xander, this is Thomas Sanders, Virgil's older brother. Oh, so you guys are theater kids as well, huh? Thomas asked enthusiastically. You head upstairs, Roman. I'll entertain your friend while you are busy. And with that, Xander was led to the basement with a bewildered expression and a final look at Roman. Roman knew that his friend was trying to make sure everything was okay here. Roman waved him off. He didn't feel like he had anything to fear. He was prepared. Xander most likely wouldn't be able to stay long enough to give Roman a ride back. Not if he and Virgil were actually going to get some work done today. They most likely work until it was time to head home for dinner. At least, if things went well. Roman took a deep breath before heading up. Once again he found Virgil listening to music in the same spot. How did he get here sooner than him? He understood yesterday when he came by bike, but now? Hey, Charming, ready to do this? Roman straightened his posture. I was born ready, he declared confidently as he took out his notes. He gave Virgil his papers and sat down. Virgil quirked a brow at him before reading through his notes. You really put thought into this, huh? He muttered after a few moments. I figured the faster we decide on a topic, the faster we can get to the interesting stuff, Roman reasoned. Virgil nodded. He took out some papers of his own. I wasn't as thorough as you. If something isn't clear, just ask, he offered. Roman took the papers and hesitated. Jane apologized to Joe today, he said. Virgil looked up, seemingly very surprised. Pleasantly surprised. She did? He asked. Roman took this to mean that Virgil had indeed not asked her to do that. Indeed. Took Joe entirely by surprise, he informed him. Well, I'm glad. Jane doesn't do apologies easily, Virgil mused as he returned his attention to the papers. Roman sensed the silent request to let the topic rest and followed his project partner's example. It seemed Virgil was honest when he said he'd liked the idea to track Greek mythology through the ages. He'd lined out a few ideas on the topic, as well as how they could present it as personifications of tragedy and comedy. Something like good cop and bad cop. So, what do you think? Virgil offered after a few minutes. Well, I'm kind of sold on your good cop, bad cop idea for Greek mythology through the ages, Roman admitted. Virgil seemed to relax a little at that. Cool. I was kind of sold on the topic as well, so we agreed then, Roman nodded. Virgil leaned back and stretched himself. Awesome. I was thinking we could figure out a basic idea of the outline of the whole thing, so we could know what topics to look into, what we already know and where we are lacking. Then we can divide the work a little and stuff like that. But first, Virgil got up. I'm going to get some drinks. What do you want? That was actually a good idea. Apple juice if you have it. Otherwise I'm fine with water. Virgil nodded and left the attic. Roman relaxed once the skater boy was out of sight. He checked his phone. Xander had let him know that his mom had called him home, so he was stuck on walking after the meeting. He told Xander that it was no big deal, and it wasn't. It was just a slight inconvenience. He'd ask him how things went with Thomas tomorrow. I noticed you left your white iron steed in the stables today, Virgil noted when he got back. Roman accepted his juice and took a sip. Yeah, Mom insisted on driving me, he explained. Nice car. Are you going to get one of those for college? Virgil asked. College. Roman would have no choice but to get a car then. He would be 18 then, of course, so he could use the trust fund his grandparents had set up for him. He could even buy a real cheap second-hand car. And once there, he could get a job to replenish his fund and pay for his living space and essentials. He'd get two if it meant having to rely on his parents a little less. Of course he couldn't turn down their effort to pay for his studies. He could apply for a scholarship, but he wouldn't take that spot from someone who actually needed it. He could sacrifice a little pride for that. Are you okay? Roman looked up in shock. Clearly he'd zoned out. Yeah, just thinking of how I'll get home. Virgil frowned. Wait, so your folks aren't picking you up? He asked. Roman let out a humorless laugh. They might, if he asked nicely. And suddenly his irritation all came pouring out. I'm not going to ask them. Not if it gets me another lecture about how much more convenient it'd be if I let them buy me a car, he growled. No matter how often I say that the school isn't that far and I barely need to go far enough to justify getting a car, or bring up the environmental and health benefits of using my bike, they just keep insisting I should let them buy me a proper mode of transportation, which means they'd be picking one they like for me, and then they'd probably hold it over my head to push me to go to a certain college or pick a certain study, which they'll probably do anyway because they'll be paying for that regardless, but it's the principle. Roman stopped himself. Why was he saying all of this to Virgil? Wasn't he going to show him that he wasn't fragile? Man, that sounds pretty messed up, Virgil offered sympathetically. Roman immediately felt guilty. He shouldn't talk that way about his parents to a virtual stranger. He took a deep breath to calm down. They don't mean to be hurtful. They just want what's best for me to impress the right people and have the best possible chance at life. I mean, they aren't the biggest fans of me being in the theater, but they've always tried to make it to my plays. And when they can't make it, they usually treat me to something special to make up for it. They are supportive and proud of me, I know that, but they just don't get me. And they'll sometimes go to great lengths to make sure he has what they thought was the best chance at a good life for him. Meaning well doesn't mean their actions can't hurt, Virgil muttered. Roman looked up. Virgil's tone of voice was so much more sorrowful than he'd ever heard it. Usually he was the type to laugh everything off. He wasn't optimistic exactly, but it seems like he expected life to suck and took it in stride. Like he laughed about it out of pure spite. If life gives you lemons, juggle them and eat them raw with a smile. Virgil was staring at his hands, which were playing with his pen as he contemplated his next words. Some stuff happened back in middle school, and my folks in Thomason, they tried to protect me by staying positive and pretending it was all fine. But it wasn't. I was upset, but I couldn't talk about it with them because I felt like they didn't think it was a big deal. I got really mad about it one day. We are still sorting everything out, but we're getting there. Roman was in awe of this moment of vulnerability, this brief glimpse into his past. I guess I see your point, he mused, not sure what else to do. Virgil shook his head. Let's get back to work. Break time is over, he smirked, devil may care attitude back in place. But now Roman wondered, what had happened to make Virgil act that way? The topic got ignored by both teens, however. They worked together on the project. They decided to start with collecting as much information as they could about how the heroes and myths of the Greeks made their way to modern times, each taking charge of different time periods. They'd send each other their research in exactly 1 week. Then they'd meet up again on Thursday, giving them both a little time to go over the collected information. It wouldn't have to be anything in depth yet. That was for after they decided what to use for the actual presentation. Roman found himself actually enjoying working with Virgil. The unexpected moment of vulnerability from both of them got rid of any remaining tension, and perhaps some misgivings. Hey, can I ask you a few questions? Virgil asked once they started packing up. Sure, Roman said curiously. The outfit. That's not your idea, right? Roman sighed and nodded. Dress for the job you want, or dress your son for the career you want him to want. They think that if I dress like this, I'll attract the right type of people. I'm probably the opposite of who they had in mind, huh? Virgil smirked. Roman chuckled. Mother would faint if she knew. Not that there is anything wrong with you, or anything, but she'd probably assume you have some sort of record. Virgil chuckled. Is that why you spy on us in the park? Silent rebellion? He wondered. Roman flushed. It was probably easier to show him. So he laid open his sketchbook and his notebook. Virgil looked it over. I watched to study how your clothes and bodies move, how gravity affects you, how the light changes. It helps with writing and sketching. Virgil nodded as he studied a drawing of a warrior in battle, based on one of the jumps Roman had watched them make. Cool. Last question. He looked up with mischief in his eyes. What do you say we play a harmless prank on your folks?